Well, thanks everybody for joining us today for our discussion and presentation around municipal protected areas and conservation at the local level. My name is Dylan Rollick and I work for Nature Canada. I'm speaking to you today from the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples, and I'm really grateful to be able to live and work on these hills and in these river systems, which have been cared for since time immemorial. As we discuss protecting natural spaces today, we must also acknowledge that the history of conservation in Canada is fraught. Like many colonial frameworks, early conservation often sought to protect biodiversity by removing people from the equation, displacing the very nations who have successfully stewarded these lands for millennia. Modern conservation must be rooted in the recognition of the enduring rights and leadership of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And I encourage everyone here to seek out and support Indigenous-led conservation initiatives in your own regions as we work towards environmental conservation together with reconciliation. Now, today's topic focuses around a commitment that the Canadian government has made to protect 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. And really, for us to be able to hit that target in the next 5 years, we need a massive surge in momentum across every level of decision makers. Today, we're focusing on the vital role of the urban and near urban communities that can help to advance this goal. You'll hear from a coalition of organizations, environmental organizations, leading the Municipal Protected Areas Program. We each bring a different and unique perspective to this work, but we're united in a single mission to elevate conservation leadership in our cities to meet Canada's national commitments. I'm representing Nature Canada. We're a charity that since 1939 has been helping Canadians discover, defend, and restore nature. And our goal really is to normalize nature in all levels of decision making to address the biodiversity crisis. Well, I work on multiple fronts at the municipal level, from bird-friendly cities to nature-based climate solutions and tree equity. Today, I'm focusing specifically on Municipal Protected Areas Program, and some of the coalition members also might call that MPAP. Joining us for this talk is our coalition partners. So you'll hear from the Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts, BC Nature, Ontario Nature, and Wildlands League. I want to thank the Environment and Climate Change Canada Department for their funding support, but also their just general support for helping us navigate the federal database system and understanding what the Canadian government's been trying to move forward on when it comes to these global targets. Following the presentations from all of these different coalition partners, we'd love to open up the floor to various panel discussions. And anytime you're open to use the chat function at the bottom and the Q&A tool for any questions that you might have. At the end of our presentations, panelists will have an open discussion to share some of those topics that come up from that Q&A section. So feel free to add it into that zone. So joining us today, we have a wide range of types of individuals and organizations. Many are environmental nature groups, part of our nature network. But we also have city staff, municipal staff, and counselors that are joining us, as well as some consultants that do environmental work in this related to this work. And all of us probably play some role towards conservation at the local level. And today's discussion is how that really relates to some of the bigger picture things that are also moving forward. So I'm going to start us with a little poll that should launch right about now. And it has three main questions that just help us understand who's in the room. First is, how strongly does your daily work align with national or global conservation targets, like Canada's commitment to protect 30% of its land and water by 2030? The following is, which barriers most impacts your community's ability to scale urban conservation right now? And the third is, which lenses do you primarily view your conservation work through? We all come at this work from a different perspective, so it'll be interesting to see what the results of these questions might be, just so that we can gauge kind of how we're approaching the work. And I will mention that we have quite a range of provincial reach on this too. There's a spread of 9 different provinces represented through participation today. You should be able to see these results. For the first, it's nice to see. So most of you don't feel disconnected, at least, to our global and national targets. You're vaguely linked or you're strategically aligned is kind of where most of you sit, which makes sense to me. Most of you are quite place-based with your work, so it makes sense that you can see the relationships, but also it's not your every focus of your integration of your work. When we think of barriers, this is also commonly what I'd expect to see, that there's a real spread in answers. There's basically all 5 of these barriers are common ones that various partners from the coalition often hear, but it's also part of the roots of why it's been known for a long time that the local sector, the urban sector, is missing from protected and conserved areas data. It's because it just takes quite a bit of capacity to do it. And the last one around lenses, it's also nice to see that there's quite a range on how people are approaching their work, and not a surprise that ecological perspectives are the dominant approach that we take. So when we're thinking about the work that we do as a coalition, we really do root it in work that's being done at the international and also federal level. Many of you are aware of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, but in short, many countries came together and committed to very specific targets to be able to reach them by 2030. And many of them directly relate to things that are happening at the local level. So I've just named 4 here, target 1, 3, 12, and 14, that are all impacted by the work that you're doing on the ground, whether you know it or not. Especially target 12, enhance our green spaces and urban planning for human well-being and biodiversity. So the Canadian government has committed internationally to see our urban areas having stronger urban planning processes in place, specifically for biodiversity, and to increase our green spaces. So I just wanted to root ourselves a little bit in what the state of things are in Canada. So if we think about the state of biodiversity, I have a few different ways that we could think about that. The first one is that our nature is really world-class. We have very large amounts of boreal forests, temperate rainforests, and wetlands compared to most countries. And we have the world's largest coastline of any other country. So it makes sense that our conservation leadership should also be world-class. Another way to look at it is to ask Canadians, what is the state of nature and wildlife? And it just so happens a group called Eco-Analytics has asked that question. And they've taken a look at, they've asked that specific question, and about 81% of Canadians say that the state of nature is good or excellent. So they're quite happy with how things are. If you ask them, how has it changed over time? You get quite a different answer. There's about half that say that it's getting worse, but there's a range from everything from it's improving to remaining the same to getting worse. So we're not quite certain about the trend, but we think that the state's pretty good. The final way that I want to look at it is from the research itself. And this is where things, especially at the urban level, play a little bit more of a specific role. If we look at wetlands that are in or near urban areas, we've lost 80% of them in Canada. And so if you're in a municipality that's struggling with flooding, managing water in the peak seasons, part of the reason might be your natural infrastructure, and that we have built over areas that we need to be able to mitigate and allow for permeability and retention of our water systems. So a good first step might be to ensure that anything that you have left from that wetland perspective, you're protecting, and you're making sure that you're not building over top of it. The same stat is found with our native prairies. 80% of our native prairies have been cultivated, and 20% of our species as a whole are at some level of risk of extinction. So I do find that there's a bit of a disconnect when we think about the perception of the state of nature and when we look at the research that's rooting it. And so I'm hoping that we can understand that maybe there is a necessity and an urgency to this work. And I'm going to try to build the case for even why it's more important at the urban level compared to most others. But before I do, every role of decision makers really does play an important role in trying to make something like biodiversity protection happen. So at the international level, that's where those standards and those targets come from, those commitments that were mentioned, the Global Biodiversity Framework. Below that, we have the Indigenous communities themselves within Canada that have many different Indigenous-led conservation initiatives that are all happening as we speak, each bringing their own unique perspectives to it, but are incredibly important for moving forward Canada's natural conservation, given a lens of reconciliation within it. At the national level, we have things like commitments. Canada has committed to protecting 30% of our land and water. And we also have something called a nature strategy. So we say we want to do certain things by 2030. And there's a bit of an update, I think, that should be coming soon from that perspective from the federal government. So we can all look forward to that. And Parks Canada has a policy for how they're moving forward national urban parks. At the provincial and territorial level, it's somewhat similar. Sometimes they have commitments that they make towards 30% protection by 2030, but they also have things called nature plans or nature agreements, and they navigate crown lands in their own unique ways. And today I'm going to be focusing mostly our whole conversation on these municipal level and site-specific actions. And they're all stemming to each other, right? They're all flowing to each other. And we see this even in the way that the Canadian government reports about their impact. Because there's targets specific to the urban level, they do even mention what's happening at the municipal level in their reports that they do to the Global Biodiversity Framework reports. But if you're a municipality and you're looking for things that you can do, things that we have seen as successful are Montreal pledges, commitments themselves to 30 by 30, and we'll show you some examples of that. Conservation zoning and policies and plans, just making sure that the structures, municipal structures that you have in place are really robust. And if you're a nature group on the ground, it's whether you're a land trust or a conservation organization, it's important to recognize and value the fact that you're the place where the habitat for flora and fauna actually is. And so you're the place where biodiversity is found, and your conservation management practices are the ones that are going to keep it around, and your stewardship efforts are going to be the ones that continue to restore it. These are the sites that ultimately can be protected and conserved. Now, another little visual experiment here. I'd like to show you why the importance of urban setting is even stronger in the Canadian context through 3 maps. These will be fairly quick. The first is that Canada's population is ultimately concentrated in southern Canada. And so the darker red areas that you see on this map mean more people densely populated in those areas. And we can overlap that by looking for how biodiverse is each region. If we do, we can see that Canadian populations overlap directly with high biodiverse regions. It's a bit hard to see on this map, but it's there, and I'll show you one last level of it. If we look for regions that are high in biodiversity and have a high level of threat, those are directly correlated with our urban centers. And so if we really want to ensure that biodiversity is protected, we have to make sure that there's a role at the urban level. Otherwise, we're missing a big part of the picture. You can see that too with our actions when it comes to birds. I'm not going to go into every squiggle line on here, but generally speaking, you can see that there's some bird types that over the last 50 years have grown in population. And there's many others that have drastically declined. And so there's 2 trends that we can see here. And the reality is the ones that often have these positive growth populations, they also have had really good regulation changes, laws put in place, practices, protection of areas that have helped maintain those populations. And the ones that don't have as much of that are the ones that we see those downward declines on. So I do think it's important that we do protect our spaces so that we continue to see that positive trend instead of the downward trend. The big question for today is, what are municipalities doing? And I'm actually not going to tell you because that's what coalition members are going to tell you through their presentations. So I'm going to leave it up to them now to share a little bit about their work and some of the insights that they've seen within different urban settings and regional areas. But I am just also going to mention that we'll share it out afterwards, but there is a website called municipal30x30.ca that has many different resources, and soon there'll be an update of more case stories as well from a variety of different urban areas for how municipalities are actually leading in protected areas. And with that overview on things, I am going to share this a little bit. I'm going to pass the torch to Renata Woodward and her regional partners as well for talking about the work that Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts has been doing.
Great. Thank you so much, Dylan. And maybe I'll keep the group a little bit longer, curious about what is done exactly on the local level, because I'm going to start with the federal and provincial level and how it ties to the local level as well. I am the executive director of the Alliance of Canadian Land Trust, and I'm joined here today with Adam Bejaoui from Réseau des Milieux Naturels Protégés, and Paul McNair from the Land Trust Alliance of British Columbia. Today, I am presenting from Longueuil, Quebec, which is located on the unceded territory of the Kenaikahaka people or the Mohawk people. So, for those who don't know what Land Trust is, it is a non-for-profit charitable organization that is committed to the long-term care of natural heritage. And these land trusts also engage in stewardship activities like monitoring, ecological restoration, sustainable land management practices, or providing educational programs, awareness campaigns, and so on. So basically creating protected areas in the South Canada mostly, and then taking care of it in perpetuity, besides many other things. The land trusts on this slide, you can see in the first um, uh, block. As I said, they are conserving and taking care of the land within their communities. The regional alliances that are working with us on most of our projects are directly supporting these land trusts and conducting advocacy and administration on the provincial level, while the Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts are representing and providing united voice to local and regional land trusts nationally and helping to build capacity of the sector. Currently, there are about 150 plus land trusts, and I'm talking today about the local and regional land trusts. We do not represent Nature Conservancy of Canada and Ducks Unlimited. And these land trusts collectively, by the end of 2024, protected 255,000 hectares and employ or provide volunteer opportunities to over 13,000 volunteers or staff. The alliance's goal are to support the land trust sector through capacity building, increasing their visibility, leading and facilitating knowledge exchanges, collaborating to decolonize the sector, advocating for community-based conservation, advancing conservation policy, as well as united local conservation organizations. And it's been such a pleasure to be working in this coalition and learning about what each partners are able to do. For us, we have took quite a bit of time to work on indigenous engagement and figuring out how indigenous organizations could work with municipalities. We did some research and development work. We looked at tax incentives, and we also engaged with some municipalities. In terms of the Indigenous relationships advancement, we are stepping up with the responsibility by listening and bringing our skills, knowledge, and network to strengthen the relationships and fostering leadership so that Indigenous voices are more prominent and systems are changed to support Indigenous land conservation. And that doesn't exclude the work within municipalities. We are trying to help the Indigenous organizations, especially Indigenous land trusts, to grow community capacity and respond to their needs, increase Indigenous representations in all of our or any conservation projects, and continuing decolonizations internally, and building towards meaningful co-governance, convening co-learning spaces, and advancing research and knowledge. And this project has helped us to build that capacity. We have created Indigenous relationship group that then collectively, which is consisting of many Indigenous people, they have created Indigenous relationship programs, and for the first time this year met in Victoria, BC, for 3 days and had several meetings during the Canadian Land Trust Summit. We had 29 participants in this Indigenous program projects. And what the impact actually of this program is, that we are creating foundational infrastructure for future implementation and policy impact, establish the network of collaborators interested in conservation partnership, and document emerging practices for knowledge sharing across the sector. So this is just some pathways. This is Becky, Big Canoe from Ontario, and who is part of our Indigenous relation work as well as the program. And again, we have done lots of research on how Indigenous people can work within municipalities, and you can find them on our website as well as the Municipal Protected Area Program website. In terms of research and development, that also includes the research related to the Indigenous relations, contains topics associated with Indigenous relations, conservation tools, and tax incentives. All of these resources can be found on our website or the Municipal Protected Areas Program website, and they consist of resources such as how can municipalities conserve land within their municipalities in each province. In British Columbia, the LTABC created Municipal Handbook. We have looked at Indigenous municipal land case studies. How can land bank be done within municipalities? Potential for partnerships between Indigenous communities, municipalities, and environmental groups. And we also dived into the tax incentives. I would like to invite Adam for a couple of minutes to tell us what have been done in terms of work in Quebec.
Hi everyone. Yeah, in Quebec, in Réseau des milieux naturels protégés, I represent more than 70 land trusts in Quebec. So, and all of them already work with the municipalities. So in Quebec, all municipalities are already engaged in 30 by 30. But sometimes we face like different challenges, like a lack of knowledge on how you can reach this 30 by 30 for some municipalities. To do some conservation can be complicated because of the property tax model or conservation in agriculture area or tools for conservation perpetuity, which are not accessible to the municipalities without a land trust. But last year we've got some good opportunities with municipalities, like the government new land use planning guideline was a step forward in sustainable land use planning, which 5 of 9 objectives are directly linked to the natural environment, like identify ecological corridors or define the importance of natural habitat in the area. So all of the land trusts and now the municipalities work on that. At RMN, we have organized a workshop, a 2 days workshop with some First Nations, the Anishinaabe Nation, Wabanaki, and Innu Nation in Quebec, to explore how we can protect biodiversity together. So the land trust and the different First Nation. And the other main opportunity in Quebec for the last year, the OECM, so the Other Efficiency Conservation Measure, which was published a year ago. So it's published in Quebec specifically. So we work on it, and it's like before it was published, we explore how we can recognize the work of municipalities to protect biodiversity. So we already know the tools is not so accessible for the municipalities. So we figure out how we can recognize the work on the work of the municipalities who already protected the biodiversity.
Thanks
And I
so
know
much.
there are many things in BC too. So Paul.
Yes, thank you so much, Adam. So I'll invite Paul from British Columbia.
Thank you, Renata. So British Columbia was a little bit different than some of the other parts of Canada in that there were two partners in British Columbia, BC Nature and LTABC. So our part of the project began by speaking with people at the provincial level and municipal level to find out what was happening and what they would find useful as a result of the project. And we heard two things. One was around education, and the second part was around research. So in terms of education, we discovered that often municipalities, the staff is well educated, but councillors get elected every 4 years. And so there's a change of knowledge in that particular subgroup. So we put together two resources. One was for municipal councillors specifically to explain what land trusts do, what CPCAT is all about, what the 30 by 30 goal is, the difference between green spaces, municipal parks, and land trusts. So we have that handbook ready. It's on our website. The second was specifically for land trusts and how they could work with councillors and municipalities and making presentations and advocating for protected areas. And again, that handbook is also on our website. We also worked with BC Nature and went to UBCM and had a booth there and had different webinars where we talked to municipalities about the project. We can do the next slide.
Mhm.
Then the second part was around research. And what we heard from councillors and the province was that they were most interested in tax incentives for landowners, which echoed exactly what Land Trust told us, that they were very interested in how to encourage landowners to protect their property. So we spent a lot of time doing research. We looked at different tax programs, not only across Canada, but the US and around the world. And we've put together a summary document that recommends specific tax programs for British Columbia. So Renata has one for ACLT that looks at tax incentives on a broad basis. We have one that looks specifically for British Columbia. And we're now just in the process of getting letters of support to send that off to the province. So those are the two areas British Columbia looked at.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And I'm going to finish this presentation with specific community or municipality that we actually achieved some progress forward. It's a municipality of the district of Lunenburg who actually committed to protect 20% of their land base by 2030. And they didn't stay just with the goal. They also created a strategy that was passed by the municipal council that identified important ecological areas that proposed to buy or accept land for conservation or creating conservation easement, and also outlined the importance of partnering with land trusts, which is fantastic, and that's what we need to do as alliances to promote the work of land trusts as the instruments to municipalities that can make a win-win situations for the land trusts and municipalities. And in addition, they also involve the community in deciding which lands to protect. And one of the success stories that just was announced at the end of 2025 was Nova Scotia Nature Trust and the Municipality of District of Lunenburg announcement of permanent conservation of Cape Lahef Island, which was significant area, and they already protected more properties with several different organizations, and we are really hoping to feature these municipalities for other smaller municipalities to get inspired by. So I will leave it there and let you listen now to the real on the ground achievers such as Ontario Nature and BC Nature.
Thanks so much, Renata. We'll start with BC Nature, and so this will be Molly Tilden and Andrew Banks. They'll be sharing a little bit about their work that they're doing in BC, working with a variety of different nature groups as well as municipalities towards directly assessing lands.
Thanks, Dylan. BC Nature, Municipal Protected Areas Program Coalition member. My name is Molly Tilden. I'm the project lead on this, and my colleague Andrew Banks is also here. He's the project manager, and he's going to help answer any questions about this work. First off, we just want to acknowledge BC Nature is based out of North Vancouver, which is on the Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. But we do work all across the province. So it's BC Nature's commitment to understand and acknowledge the ancestral caretakers of wherever it is that we are conducting our work. So if you're not familiar with BC Nature, we are a federation of local naturalist clubs across the province. We currently have 64 different clubs that we represent province-wide. We are a primarily volunteer-run nonprofit. However, the Municipal Protected Areas Program is funded. And we also have another program called the Key Biodiversity Areas Program, which is funded as well. And that program works a little differently than the MPAP. It recognizes and designates areas of biodiversity significance and then organizes stewardship activities on those lands. It is our mission to know nature and keep it worth knowing. As Dylan mentioned, BC Nature is a member of the MPAP Coalition, and our work really came to be to support Canada's commitment to protect 30% of lands and waters by 2030. But that is only one of the commitments that Canada made for biodiversity in adopting the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework that Dylan was explaining. But this is the goal that we primarily focus on in our work, is the 30 by 30 commitment in British Columbia. So Canada is keeping track of their goal towards meeting this target by recording all their protected areas in a database called the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas Database, also known as CPCAD. And this map is demonstrating all the areas that are currently protected in Canada and are registered in this database as of 2024. We're expecting that this map is going to get updated soon, and there's going to be a little bit more protections as of 2025's database updates, but this is the status currently. Most of these areas are national parks or provincial parks. There's also some Indigenous protected areas as well. But the municipal protected areas are not being captured in this database. There's a bit of a gap there. So that is why our program was developed, is to try and support local governments to get those municipal protected areas recognized and registered in this database. British Columbia has also made the same commitment as Canada to protect 30% of provincial lands by 2030. And we're currently at 19.9% protected. So we still have a ways to go. As part of our work, we work with local governments across the province to understand if they have lands that would be eligible for this database. And in order for them to be registered, they need to meet 4 main criteria. First off, they need to have clearly defined geographical boundaries. We need to be aware of what the area in question is and where its boundaries are. Secondly, we need to ensure that these areas are conserving biodiversity, that we're not interested in registering parks, for example, that are sports fields or playgrounds. It's okay if there's a small playground, so long as the majority of the park is a forested or a healthy ecosystem supporting biodiversity. Essentially, we're looking more at nature parks. And then thirdly, these areas need to have some sort of protective mechanism in place that prohibits any actions that are incompatible with the conservation of biodiversity. So when this comes to municipal parks, for example, this is typically a park regulation bylaw. We also look at conservation zoning and those kinds of protective mechanisms that prohibit activities such as polluting waterways, disturbing wildlife, and those kinds of things that would not allow biodiversity to be conserved. And then finally, we are interested in areas that are intended to be protected in perpetuity, ideally. So if there was for example, a park where a municipality wasn't sure if maybe it was going to be developed into a more of an amenity sports field type park, we wouldn't be interested in registering those sites. But if there was a very steep site with riparian areas and there was no intention of this ever being anything but a nature space, then that would be a good, strong candidate. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly discuss what is the process when we work with local governments. We intend for our process to be low time commitment on the end of the municipal staff. It's also no cost for participation. We're trying to reduce barriers for municipalities and regional districts who want to participate and have their land recognized in CPCAD. So First, we start off by reaching out and sharing information about the program. And then following that, if the municipality is on board and they want to participate, we do a desktop analysis of all municipally owned lands, primarily parkland, but also we're looking at water supply areas as well. And we come back with a list of sites that we think are eligible for registration. And then we receive input from the local government staff. It's a very important step because they often have information that we don't have about the long-term intentions of certain parcels. So it's really important that we get consent on our list and we receive that input. And then finally, once we've got that consent, we do the registration process on behalf of the local governments. And then those areas will be uploaded to the database, reviewed by Environment and Climate Change Canada, and counted towards the 30 by 30 commitment. So there are several benefits to participating in the program for the local governments. First and foremost, municipalities can pride themselves in the fact that they have committed land that is now contributing to a global biodiversity goal. There's over 190, I think it's 196 other countries that have committed to this 30 by 30. So it is a global commitment. It isn't just a Canadian commitment that they would be participating in. And then participation also validates local government conservation policies, things in their OCP and perhaps their park management plan that state that they have intentions to protect biodiversity and nature. By participating in this program, it's a very clear indication that those objectives are being met. It also raises the local government profile. We often support media releases that get quite a bit of excitement from residents. So it's sort of bringing awareness to the work that the governments are doing. And we also facilitate some relationship building with local nature clubs as well and the local governments, building relationships there. And finally, it may position governments favorably when they apply for future funding and support for conservation initiatives. So how are municipalities doing Canada-wide? This slide just demonstrates this is specifically municipal areas that have been submitted to CPCAD to date. And British Columbia is a really leader in this regard. We have over 40,000 hectares submitted of municipal land. Ontario and Nova Scotia have also made significant contributions. And there's lots of opportunity to expand this work to other provinces across the country. Now I just want to quickly highlight a few case stories that we're really proud of. This is a map of Metro Vancouver Regional District. Back in 2024, they submitted over 8,000 hectares to CPCAD with our support, and this was primarily regional parkland. And this is just very significant. If you remember what Dylan was talking about at the beginning of this presentation, these urban centers have some of the most biodiversity, and they're also under the most pressure from urban development. So these areas are where we really want to focus our attention when it comes to protecting land. And it's very encouraging to see that the Metro Vancouver Regional District is rising to this challenge. It is challenging because there's so many people living in this area. To designate so much land for nature is quite an achievement. And Metro Vancouver has also committed to reaching 50% of land protected by 2050. And they're one of the few regional districts. I actually am not aware of any other regional districts who have made that commitment. So it's just really nice to see them leading the charge on this. And then subsequently, after that submission in 2025, the city of Surrey signed on. Their protected areas are shown in orange, and they submitted over 189 parks, which is also a very significant contribution. And it was just encouraging to see how that sort of snowballed from the Metro Vancouver submission to the Surrey submission. And this area is getting quite a bit of protection, which is really great to see. And then I just want to talk about an example from the Okanagan as well. The District of Summerland is a fairly small local government, but they participated in our program in 2025, and they registered over 330 hectares of parkland in the database. One of the areas was Adams Bird Sanctuary, which is a really small little park, but it has quite a nice history. It was originally owned by some homesteaders named Irvine and Doreen Adams, and they were nature lovers. Irvine used to express his passion through art, and Doreen expressed her passion through conservation volunteerism. She was one of the founding members of the Okanagan-Similkameen Park Society, and she was very involved in the protection of Cathedral Lakes and Okanagan Mountain Parks. And this was their homestead. And once they passed away, it was donated to the District of Summerland to be a nature space in perpetuity. And it's just a nice example of how passionate residents at a local level have this conservation legacy, and their land is actually going towards this global biodiversity commitment, and just how that those series of events came to be. It's just sort of a nice story. And finally, the last one I want to highlight is the village of Nakusp. This is a really small village. There's less than 2,000 residents. And in 2025, they submitted 92 hectares to the database. And one of the areas that they registered, which on this map, it's the one in the far right corner there, is within one of the key biodiversity areas for the boreal caribou southern mountain population. And this means that it's an area that is supporting more than 2% of the remaining herd. And it's just a nice kind of combination of our two programs, the Key Biodiversity Areas Program and the Municipal Protected Areas Program, kind of working in tandem here. And that area, it also supports many other species at risk, including grizzly bear, Coeur d'Alene salamander, and wolverine. And it's just a really nice example of how very small municipalities can also make meaningful contributions for biodiversity. It doesn't have to be a huge park. It can still be a smaller area and still be important. That is the end of our little presentation here. So thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much, Molly. There's some questions that have come in, and also some celebrations that have been going on in the chat, because you do have some of the municipal planners that have been involved in some of your communities that are on the call today. So you can look at that while Ontario Nature does their presentation. So we're going to move on to Kelsey, who's going to speak about Ontario Nature's work in the Ontario context. Similar to BC Nature in many ways, but each province actually has their own unique structures of how they move forward protected areas and barriers to how that happens. So Ontario Nature will be sharing a bit about the Ontario context.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. So thanks, Molly. I'm going to share a bit about Ontario Nature's involvement in the Municipal Protected Areas Program. We have a similar kind of objective to BC Nature, in that we conduct assessments on behalf of municipalities and other partners towards contributing to the 30 by 30 target. And so I'll try not to overlap too much with what Molly spoke about. All right. Okay, so if you don't know us, Ontario Nature is an environmental charity established in 1931. And our mission is to protect wild species and wild spaces through conservation, education, and engagement. And we represent thousands of members and supporters across the province. So since Ontario Nature works largely in Ontario across the province on 30 by 30, I just wanted to share a quick map of the progress to date towards the 30 by 30 target. So progress to date, Ontario is at a little bit under 11%. So provincially, we're not ranking so well compared to other provinces on protected and conserved areas. And as you can see, Southern Ontario is particularly underrepresented. Yet, as Dylan mentioned before, it contains some of the most biodiverse and threatened landscapes. And so these are super important areas to recognize because biodiversity we're all part of this web of life. Biodiversity helps support and maintain that web of life. So it's essential to recognize these areas so we know where they are for future conservation efforts. Okay, so I'm going to move on here. As Molly mentioned, there are 4 main criteria that qualifying lands must meet to contribute to the target. These are kind of what we look at when we do our assessments. And they're the same criteria that BC Nature highlighted because they're part of a pan-Canadian standard for biodiversity conservation. So they're the same across Canada. We use the same assessment tool, province to province. It's just the process might differ slightly because there's such different local contexts to assessing land. And so there are, for what we work with, there's 2 main designation types that qualifying lands are designated as. So protected areas are one of them, and other effective area-based conservation measures, or OECMs, is the other one that we kind of focus on. And they differ slightly. So for protected areas, conservation is the primary goal. So sometimes people think of them like the classic Western fortress-style conservation, where there's not a lot of human activity. A lot of the activities are limited or reduced in some way, but they can have more public interactions and as well. So the OECMs, the difference between them is that conservation may not be the primary goal, but both PAs and OECMs both have to meet the same criteria and deliver effective biodiversity conservation. Another classification I just listed there quickly is Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas, because a cornerstone of the 30 by 30 target is respecting and recognizing Indigenous rights and territories. And so in 2018, the Indigenous Circle of Experts described these main characteristics, but the main one is that IPCAs must be designated by the communities or nations. So if IPCAs if nations or communities wish to contribute these places to 30 by 30, they have to be assessed against the criteria for protected areas and OECMs. Regardless if IPCAs move forward towards 30 by 30, they represent a really long-term commitment to conservation grounded in community priorities and those that center Indigenous rights and responsibilities. And I've just listed a couple of real world examples here so you can see them in action. And a lot of these are from Ontario, specific examples from Ontario. So we have a lot of the places that have already been highlighted by the other partners here today. Okay, so quickly what Ontario Nature does, I've already mentioned it, but we largely conduct assessments for the NPAP. We've worked with over 15 partners, including municipalities like the City of Hamilton, the City of Sudbury, and many other conservation partners, collectively contributing over 9,000 hectares towards the target for the NPAP work, largely in Southern Ontario. And we've also released a bunch of resources, and we wrote a report called the Municipal Contributions to Canada's Protected Areas Target, which includes some wise practices that municipalities in Ontario are using in order to successfully contribute to the target. So I can link that after my presentation's over. And I just wanted to highlight that the process for the assessment is pretty similar between Ontario and BC, at least in terms of what our coalition's doing. The main difference is that we gain consent from partners that we work with prior to conducting the assessment. And we just found that works better for us because we're given the green light before conducting an assessment. The second piece is that the province itself, a ministry within the province, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, reviews our assessments before they're submitted towards the target, towards the database. And so that's a pretty key difference. Okay, quickly wanted to highlight a couple case stories. One of our partners that we've worked with. One's the city of Sudbury, and the other one is the city of Richmond Hill and Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. So the city of Sudbury is a really cool partner I wanted to highlight because it's very unique. It's essentially transformed from a city that used to look like a moon because it was one of the largest industrial mining complexes in the world. The emissions got so bad that most of the 330 lakes were considered dead largely, and wildlife disappeared from the landscape. So recognizing that something needed to change, the city began what's called the regreening program in 1978. And so part of this project is it's a large scale and long-term municipal restoration project. So since 1978, you can see what they've done here on the screen. It's pretty incredible, planting over 10 million trees and shrubs, over 3,500 hectares of lands treated with lime. And because of these efforts, over 95% of the 330 lakes now have self-sustaining fish populations, and threatened species like elk have reappeared and returned to the lands. Another key part of this highlighted city is that the city itself is committed to achieving the 30 by 30 target within the municipal boundaries, which is one of the first commitments of this kind by a municipality in Canada. And in order to support this goal, the mayor appointed a task force to identify lands and help move things forward. So we've been working with the task force since 2023 and conducted an assessment, a first batch assessment of 3,000 hectares. And so further than that, the city is not only working on recognition of their protected areas, they're working to strengthen policy protections so that more lands can qualify in the future and the biodiversity can be conserved even further. And that's just a quick picture of all of the regreening efforts, the green areas there, all the trees that have been planted. Okay, and last case story I just wanted to highlight is the city of Richmond Hill and Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. So this was a joint assessment. We assessed over 500 hectares of the city's lands and the Conservation Authority's lands together, largely because they already work together to protect these areas through management policies, inventories, and on-the-ground conservation. All of the sites that contributed are managed by the city, and they're part of the Greenway system, which has some of the most high-value habitat in the municipality with the strongest policy protections. Half the sites are also situated on the Oak Ridges Moraine and the Greenbelt, so both really environmentally significant areas. And this little blue area on the map is an astronomy observatory, and it registered as an OECM. So this is the David Dunlop Observatory, features a great telescope dome. It has large networks of woodlands and marsh habitat. And so the reason why this was designated as an OECM is because there's more than one management priority. So they're balancing education, research, conservation, and recreation all in one space, which a lot of municipalities already do, but it's just really successful at it. They've completed several phases of ecological restoration, and they're really trying through planning and master plans to increase biodiversity. So it's just a really interesting example that I wanted to highlight. Yeah, that's it from me. I'll just pass the mic over to Dave.
Great. And just before we go to Dave, Kelsey's point about an observatory, there's been some questions in the Q&A that have to do with, what types of places are already in the database. And yes, things like national parks are in there. There's certain categories that are already in the database, but there's also kind of unique opportunities that are almost missed completely from the narrative, like was just shared. Dave is going to speak from Wildlands League, who takes an approach of connectivity to the work that he does within the Ontario context, and he'll be sharing more about that.
Thanks,
and then
everybody.
we'll open it up to questions after that.
Thanks, everybody. Just as I'm getting my screen up, I just want to congratulate the other MPAP members, and every time I hear it, it's very inspiring, the work that is happening around the country. Can you see my slides? And you can hear me okay?
Yep, you're good, Dave.
Good. I got my timer on. So Dylan, hopefully I'll be under time. So Wildlands League has been around for almost 60 years, not as long as Ontario Nature. We're about half as old, but still been around for a long time. And for many years, we were known. We're also a nonprofit conservation organization focusing on parks, but also sustainable use outside of parks. And we're actually started our journey as the Algonquin Wildlands League, focused in Algonquin Park, hence the moose. And trying to get logging out of Algonquin. We were successful in other parks, but we're still working on Algonquin. We're also known for working in the north on caribou. I used to call myself a caribou nag, but we were really working with First Nations and communities and industry to try to protect caribou. We're also active in the Ring of Fire. Many of you will have heard about the Ring of Fire, maybe recently in Northern Ontario, but we've been working on it for over 10 years. And then when Rouge National Urban Park was established, again around 10 years ago, we really started a pivot to focusing on Southern Ontario. And Rouge was the first national urban park, and we helped get it established along with a bunch of other organizations. But our focus was on the legislation, getting the legislation right that prioritized ecosystem health or ecological integrity in a heavily urban and peri-urban landscape. So it's kind of the first of its kind, and we hope there'll be more to come. And then to promote the Rouge and the National Urban Park, we had something called Paddle the Rouge that we ran for over 6 years. I think we did seven consecutive years, where we taught kids to paddle canoes and kayaks for free and welcomed many newcomers, land in Canada in that area, and hadn't been in wild nature before. So we had a lot of new Canadians coming out to these events and promoted this. And it was very popular with a strategic demographic that is politicians, and helped popularize the Rouge and set the stage for subsequent national urban parks. So I should say here that our focus, as opposed to other members of MPAP, is really on establishing new national urban parks and expanding the one existing one, the Rouge. Again, around this time, we got intrigued with nature connectivity models, particularly Jeff Bowman out of Trent University using CircuitScape, and we really zeroed in on and had Jeff present to us several times before we finally understood the concept. But the idea here is CircuitScape can, and you guys are probably, many of you are familiar with it, can generate heat maps, which basically the warmer the color, the more animals flowing through an area. So the red is sort of pinch points where you might have a lot of animals kind of narrowed down to an area. The yellow area is provides a lot of options for animals to move through the landscape. And then the blue or green areas are really hard for animals to move through. And those are cities or large bodies of water or intensive agriculture. So you can see southern and southwestern Ontario, not a lot of connectivity and ability for animals to move. So what really inspired us to develop what we call our Nature Connectivity Project, where we were thinking, okay, if we helped us establish Rouge National Urban Park, what if we have more national urban parks connected by ecological corridors? So you can see there's the green belt around the Greater Golden Horseshoe and up through the Niagara Peninsula to Bruce Peninsula, or up through the Niagara Escarpment to the Bruce Peninsula National Urban Park or National Park up there, as well as some lighter green, which are the woodlots in southern Ontario. But our vision was to knit it all together. How can we knit these together using national urban parks or other municipal or protected areas as nodes, but connecting through the landscape? And then around the same time, we put out an op-ed and a blog about how Canada needed a Southern strategy for nature, for all the reasons that my colleagues have talked about, the high population density, the great amount of biodiversity, and the low amount of protection. And coincidentally, correlation is not causation. Very soon after, the federal government came up with a bunch of commitments that we've talked about around halting and reversing, biodiversity loss. So our focus is on expanding the Rouge. The Rouge actually intersects municipal protection because part of the Rouge land in the beginning was municipal land that was set aside and protected under a kind of a hodgepodge: municipal land, some federal land, some province land, and then it all came together under Parks Canada. And then currently we're helping, and there's a process underway for the transfer of Transport Canada lands that were set aside, actually expropriated for an airport over 50 years ago, and then the commitment came out a year ago that those lands were going to be transferred into the Rouge. So we want the highest possible amount of that land being transferred to the Rouge. And then we're also working with connectivity within the green belt, which is kind of the lighter green. The predominant color on this map is mostly green belt. So embedded in the green belt and maintaining that connection between parks, Rouge National Urban Park and other natural areas is really important. Another National Urban Park initiative that's quite far along, but it's not established yet, is in Windsor, and what many people are calling Ojibwe National Urban Park, or proposed. And again, it's a consolidation or a constellation, I guess, of municipal lands. There's a large provincial nature preserve kind of in the middle, and then Parks Canada only owns a small chunk, the yellow bit on the west side of that. So again, municipal protection has set the stage for national park designation in this case. And so we hope, and we're working with local partners, Friends of Ojibwe Prairie, who's an Ontario Nature member in that area, to establish a national urban park in Windsor that would consolidate all these lands under Parks Canada and under legislation, ideally, to have the highest level of protection. And then another example is Guelph, which is not as far along in the pipe. Now, there's a local group, Urban Park Guelph, that is proposing the former Ontario reformatory lands become a national urban park, but their vision doesn't stop there. They have a big vision for Guelph. They actually want what they're calling a constellation of protection, with the proposed national urban park at the center, but then other forms of protection, whether municipal or otherwise, conservation areas linked through a network that's shown in this schematic. So they've got a big vision, and we're trying to help them out. So we do a number of things. We're not as systematic as my colleagues. We're kind of like taking opportunities where we can. So a few weeks ago, in a snowstorm, over 100 people in Guelph showed up to a free swim and free cupcakes at a civic center in Guelph, where they could see the maps that we produced, and some of the Urban Park Guelph folks were there to talk about this vision. And it was really to build up citizen support. And then a few weeks later, and again, correlation is not causation, Guelph City Council voted down a proposal that would have put housing in the middle of these former reformatory lands. So we like to think we're having an impact, because there's sometimes these coincidences show up. We like to get out on the land. Again, we're kind of using every tool we can to build support. And we've had several road ecology workshops, 2 in the Rouge, 1 in Guelph, and 1 in Windsor. We have another one in the works. I think we're going to do another one in Guelph in the spring. And road ecology is where connectivity, in this case between a proposed national urban park in Windsor and the rest of the landscape, is impinged by highways, roadways, streets, or even rail corridors. And road ecology seeks to identify those areas and then mitigate them through crossing structures, either overpasses, underpasses, culverts, and enhancement. So we've learned a lot. We're working with a road ecologist who actually knows what she's talking about. And then we've arranged these events. And so, I just, one little anecdote. So I was with Parks Canada last week, some folks, one guy that's based in the mountain parks, and we were in Rouge National Urban Park, which compared to Yoho, Banff, whatever, you think it's not really nature. And he was amazed about all the things he was seeing and the things he heard about, because in road ecology in Rouge, it's often to have 5 or 6 species of snakes killed on the roadway. And he's like, we have 1 species of snake in where I am. And we saw a mink running along the shore of a rehabilitated pond in Rouge National Urban Park. And I see mink, quite frequently. He says, I've only seen 1 mink ever where I am in the mountain parks. So it was interesting to me, because it spoke about the biodiversity right in our urban areas that is so important and so vital and so amazing. This guy's from a wilderness area, and he's like just amazed about the what he's seeing in cities. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for your time, and looking forward to more Q&A and a panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for sharing how you're looking at connectivity and really bringing in the community side to it all. All right, now you should be able to see all of us on screen, and we are going to open it up to questions. And there's already been quite a few that have come through the Q&A period, the Q&A section. Some have been throughout the webinar chat as well. And some of you might just have something that you're pondering about that you want to think about and you want to share. So before we get into any of those questions, I hope that this has been informative for you, and hopefully there's been something that has surprised you or intrigued you, made you think about your work a little bit differently. And everybody that's here on this call right now would love to connect with you if you do have anything specific that you want to talk about later. So just to be clear, there's been a couple logistics questions. So we'll just start with that maybe. That after this webinar, we'll certainly have it recorded, and we'll share the recording. I'll share some of the key things that have come from the Q&A and from the chat as well. And I'll certainly share all of our contacts so that you can follow up with us from there. Now, for going through this panel discussion, I want to open it up to all of you first for any questions that you may have. So you can add them to the Q&A, but another way to do it as well would be to put up your hand. So if you want to put up your hand, you can do I can allow you to talk so that you can share with a group and do your question live if you like. So I'll just give everyone a moment to digest all of that information and add anything that you like into that Q&A or put up your hand.
Dylan, I just noticed a question That I might be able to answer in the Q&A. Someone's wondering if forests managed under forest management plans can be counted towards Ontario's OECMs. And I would say yes, depending. We've assessed the Northumberland County Forest in Ontario in the past. Portions of the county forest was able to contribute to the 30 by 30 target because there's multiple reasons, but those zones are special management zones. So 10% of the county forest was set aside from commercial forestry activities, and they're protected and they're actively restored for biodiversity protection. So that 10%, I think it's around 440 hectares, is contributing as an OECM. So they have a forest management plan that's about 20 years in length, and it sets out all these conservation goals for those special management zones. And they're also registered under FSC certification and Eastern Ontario Model Forest certification. So kind of all of those things together is helping them contribute as OECM. So it depends, but I would say sustainable forestry is compatible as OECMs.
And to Kelsey's point, sometimes when you're trying to figure out eligibility of being a protected area or an OECM, it's this building up of multiple protections that makes it possible. I see a couple hands, so I'm going to move to those first, and then I'll open it up to panelists to do just like Kelsey did, where if there's something that came up in those Q&As that you think is kind of interesting to bring up, to share it out. So we'll start with Hagen Hondorf. Your question? You are now unmuted. Can't quite hear you, Hagen.
Sorry, I'm not sure if my mic is working.
It is now.
Yep, it is. Yeah, sorry, that was a mistake. I just withdrew my hand. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. David, you're up. David Haley.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm from British Columbia, and we've had a number of years of very severe wildfire. So I'm wondering how wildfire fits into the planning process. And I'm a forester by trade, and I'm just wondering whether activities around fuel management or are considered as sustainable forestry. Thank you.
So much, David.
So maybe I can answer that one. So we, as you know, we look into municipal lands mainly, and most of those lands are parklands, and they may or may not have a fuel management plan in place. If they do, we would expect the municipality to follow it, to do it in an environmentally friendly way, and that's our expectation. But it is up to the municipality to manage the lands as they best can, especially in parks. And if they have a fuel management plan in place, that they follow it.
I do want to just mention, David, I think you're bringing up a good point, though, about this juxtaposition of the reality of our environmental climate and protected areas. And I know of many protected areas as well as IPCAs that have really had major forest fires that have gone through them. And it does change their structures. From their conservation management plans, they would have to address the after effects of that as well, for what that means for those areas. So forest fire management is certainly part of what has to happen. Kelsey.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a fully formed thought, but yeah, prescribe if there are communities. I know of a couple communities in Ontario where tallgrass prairies are still present, and they actively manage and do prescribed burns and cultural burns where appropriate. And so definitely those kind of management practices and stewardship practices are super important to ensuring that, ecological, it's not just about fuel load management, but it's about interacting with the land in the way that the land wants to be interacted with. So it's just, yeah, I would say that's a super important point to making sure the lands aren't damaged by the effects of climate change.
Yeah, Dylan, can I do a supplemental?
You certainly can.
Yeah. So just for additional background, so I participate with the Coastal Douglas Fir Conservation Partnership. So Southeast Vancouver Island, the Gulf Islands, and a few other areas. And it experiences summer droughts. Um, the CDF subzone does have a history of fire, more periodic than sort of annual or regular. But it's also highly fragmented in terms of ownership. And there's a lot of discussion around trying to reintroduce fire, whether it be for cultural purposes or just as a means of reducing the fuel loading. But we're really struggling with how to do it, how much preparation needs to go into it, what treatments can be done while respecting some of the environmental services and conservation values that currently exist. And then what do you do with the material that's generated from those treatments? And I guess lastly, where does the money come from? So it's a thorny problem, and I'll just stop there. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for a little bit more of the context. And David, maybe we can reach out outside of this for talking about a little bit more. To the point of multi-stakeholders, multi-landowners, that's a common scenario for this type of land conservation to happen. And yes, there has to be a way to kind of get all parties on board on that. It's tricky. Whether you're talking about forest fires or you're talking about droughts to wetlands or you're talking about whatever, there's a lot of current challenges that our environmental areas have. And simply protecting it doesn't address all of that. You also have to have the good management practices in place. Are there any other questions from the group before we go to the Q&As? Okay. So let's see here. We've had quite a few that have come through that have already been answered, but maybe there's some that kind of sparked a little bit of interest from some of the panelists that they'd like to elaborate on a little bit more. I was mid-process responding a little bit further to James Casey's point around Target 2 that has to do with restoration of degraded areas. And he was curious about tools and data that exist for reporting on that type of restoration work. So just to note that from all conversations that I've had about Target 2, one of the biggest challenges is baseline data. And so understanding our current degraded state and having proper maps of that and proper definitions of that so that we know how we're improving on it. So that's still a challenge that exists within that target from what I've heard. That said, there's still groups that are doing great work when it comes to restoration. And the Sudbury example is a pretty cool one, like Kelsey mentioned. Any questions that panelists want to highlight?
Yeah, Dylan, with respect to the question about the economic benefits of nature and nature municipalities. So you have to, for a municipality to look at that, a very good way, as I mentioned in the chat, was to look at the Natural Assets Management Initiative. And that's an initiative where you can get someone to come in and count the financial value of natural assets within your municipality. And it's a very powerful tool, especially if the municipality knows how to use it or can use it. One municipality I know of, for example, have a value for all their natural assets, and then they're seeking to increase that value, which is cool, which is powerful. But they're also seeking to do that through a tax. you actually have put in an environmental tax based on the value of natural assets. So there's actually a property tax levy on natural assets that goes to the property owners, and that money is used to promote, restore natural assets within that municipality. So it's a very powerful tool for the economics of natural assets within a municipality.
A great example, Andrew. I'm a big fan of their work as well, and they have detailed reports around what's happening with different municipalities. So if you're trying to understand like how that's done for different places, it's a good location. But I also just want to mention, because a few of the questions too have had to do with there's quite a few Alberta representatives here, and there is someone that's in the crowd that a guy, and he created a great resource that also has to do with the natural infrastructure. And so I'm just sharing that in here as well, the Municipal Eco Toolkit.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions, as there maybe one or two last ones? I see Lynn.
Hi, I'm from Guelph, and I was actually involved with the Urban Park Guelph that Dave was referring to. As we're another organization, but we're working on the same goal. But I also wanted just to ask what we as smaller organizations can do to help this process along, because it's fascinating, and it would love to be able to promote it or in some way or let people know about it. And what can we do?
I'll take that. Hi, Lynn. Sorry I didn't mention Yorkland's Green Hub. Also active on the Guelph front. So I think a few things. I mean, keep the pressure on local councillors. In the Guelph case, there's a competing land use for the site, a local hospital. I think that issue needs to get resolved. And then from your Guelph compatriots, it sounds like there's several other places that would be better to build a hospital in or on. And then once that's taken care of, I think local champions will come out of the woodwork. I think they've been holding back because no one wants to come out against a hospital. So I think the local champions will come, and then the financial, as Andrew just talked about, very timely, the financial benefits of more protection, both for nature-based solutions to climate change and natural infrastructure, but also from a tourism and a visitor experience point of view. I think can help, and then alleviating, I think, some of the financial burden from the local coffers, and potentially uploading to Parks Canada is a case that can be made, and then working with your local MPs to say nature's important, let's fund it more rather than funding it less, and get more money for Parks Canada to actually do the management they needed. But anyways, happy to chat more with you, and hope to see you in Guelph soon.
Thank you.
I think, Lynn, also there's a side that hasn't been explored as much as it should be, which is the community celebration of these sites as protected areas once they are recognized. And there's a lot of work that many groups could do on that, and work with their municipalities once that's official. But that's a whole nother can of worms. I see a question from Penny.
Thanks, Dylan. Really, just quick question for Andrew and Molly. I had heard that the program was going to be defunded, and that March would be our final deadline. But is this extending beyond March? Because we're still working on some areas, as you know.
The funding from ECCC expires at the end of March. Well, we have access to other funding, so our project continues. We're not stopping, so you're safe. You're in safe hands.
Thank goodness. Thank you.
But I think perhaps sending letter of support to the Environment Canada or Nature BC, Nature Canada would be really helpful, because we would love to continue this project, but it's impossible without, to go to the extent we did without future funding.
Well, thanks everybody for taking the time here. I'll leave it, just in case there's one final question, I'll leave a chance for anyone to raise up their hand. And with that, I thank you all for coming. Again, this was a great active chat that had many different ideas that came through, many Q&As. So again, I'll try to compile that for everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts as well. And thanks to the coalition members for participating in this joint webinar. I really appreciate hearing all the different unique perspectives that we bring. And I really want to thank all of the nature groups that are in the audience. That's the majority of the audience, as well as that very important municipal staff and council side that's actually moving forward these projects. So thanks for everybody for participating and for caring about protection in this way. And I hope that you connect with us more and find ways that we can make this this type of initiative move forward.